What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got another live fantasy football mock draft for you. This time back on Yahoo with a 12-team half-point PPR mock. We have got the 9th selection overall. Should be a good one. And before we get into it, another quick reminder for everyone interested, go ahead and check out the all-new and updated website at alldaypigskin.com for some exclusive content. Go ahead, become a member, join the newsletter, all that good stuff. And also, while you're there, go ahead and get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It's a great resource at a great value. It's got everything you could possibly want. Top 150 overall player rankings, individual player bios, tiers, projections, along with general fantasy advice. So check that out now. All the details in the description. But let's get into this draft because the first 3 picks have been made, and they are as follows in this order: Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and then Alvin Kamara. So maybe a bit of a surprise seeing Kamara being drafted ahead of Ezekiel Elliott, but it makes sense. Maybe he's being regarded as a higher ceiling guy in terms of his pass catching abilities. It makes sense to me. Honestly, my biggest takeaway from seeing Kamara in the top 4 is it makes sense, but it breaks my heart just because, man, the value only a couple of weeks ago for Alvin Kamara was absolutely astounding. You could get him outside the top 4, outside the top 5 at certain points in time, and that really is no longer the case. But let's not fret over that because it is our turn to make a selection, and we've got a choice here between going potentially wide receiver, going running back, and I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of a gamble maybe and go with a running back in the second round and instead select my second overall wide receiver in Julio Jones here. We'll see how this plays out. Per the rankings for Yahoo, we should have gone Joe Mixon, but I feel a little bit more confident in Julio Jones in that offense and Matt Ryan and the Falcons, them being in the NFC South. I'm all about it, and I believe we'll still have a chance to get a RB1 type of guy with our second pick here. Now, ideally, the guys that I would like to see are a Kenyon Drake, an Austin Eckler, a Josh Jacobs, and it looks like we'll have at least one of those options available to us because the picks after ours were as follows. After our pick of Julio Jones, you saw Mixon, then you see Tyreek Hill, then Nick Chubb, then DeAndre Hopkins, and then Miles Sanders. So if this goes as follows, I was about to say Kenyon Drake would be the next player off the board, but no, instead it is Aaron Jones. And I'm jumping for joy because Kenyon Drake is my next best available player. It's either him or Austin Eckler here. Josh Jacobs also gets consideration, but since we are in a PPR format, I'm going to go with Drake because I believe he is on a very high-octane offense, doesn't have as many question marks at the most important position, the quarterback that is, as it would with Austin Eckler and the LA Chargers. And no more David Johnson obviously means a ton of opportunities for Drake. So Julio Jones, Kenyon Drake right from the get-go. Afterwards, you see Josh Jacobs. So again, it shows you that people are on the same wavelength as us in terms of where these other running backs should be going. If it wasn't, like I said, Drake or Eckler, it would have been Josh Jacobs for us. And Eckler goes right after this. So honestly, the 3 guys that we were considering might not necessarily go in that order, but they were the next 3 picks. Then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so a bit of a run on running backs, and it makes sense in these bigger leagues. That's what you expect. I mean, honestly, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 picks were all running backs, and it's going to become a position that is kind of potentially barren here by the time it gets to us in the 3rd round. The next best group of guys are Melvin Gordon, James Conner, Chris Carson, Todd Gurley. Then you see a Jonathan Taylor, Mark Ingram, Leonard Fournette. So I wouldn't be mad having Leonard Fournette as our second running back. Todd Gurley would be great as well. James Conner, who again is a guy that we've been singing his praises. His ADP has shot way up, especially here on Yahoo. A couple of weeks ago, he probably would have been closer to this range, the Leonard Fournette range. That is no longer the case. So again, The analysts, the quote-unquote experts, are coming along to what we've been saying since the beginning, that James Conner will be a bell cow type of guy, and that this Pittsburgh offense is still loaded, still got a great offensive line, and that he should be an RB1, presumably, that as long as he stays healthy. Then after our selection of Kenyon Drake, we went through the next couple of picks all the way up to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Afterwards, Kenny Golladay, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes towards the end of the second round, then George Kittle, then Allen Robinson. So Patrick Mahomes here at this point in time, look, I get it. He's a tier 1 quarterback. He's elite. Him and Lamar Jackson are in a category by themselves. But I don't take quarterbacks this early, and I don't advise you guys to do it. Maybe if it's a super flex where you can go ahead, play 2 quarterback type of situation, then you definitely consider it. But with this being a regular format, a regular roster, why not go ahead and just wait on a Kyler Murray or on a Russell Wilson or on a Dak or on a Matt Ryan, Drew Brees? The list goes on and on, that you can get 5, 6, 7 rounds later instead of going ahead and sacrificing an RB1 or a wide receiver 1 in favor of Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson here. So this thing is making its way back to us, and we are next. In fact, we'll see what happens here. Melvin Gordon just went off the board, and if we're looking wide receiver, the big board would say DJ Moore, potentially Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, and I do like those guys, but because of what you saw happen with the running back market, I'm going to go ahead and get my next best available running back here before it gets really bad. That is Todd Gurley. So right from the get-go, we are loading up on Atlanta Falcons. It kind of just happened to go ahead and work out this way. I'm not a big fan of having a wide receiver and running back stack on the same team. I'd much rather have it be Matt Ryan and Julio or Matt Ryan and Todd Gurley. But at the end of the day, we're going best player available, especially early on here. And getting that second running back to pair up with Kenyon Drake is more of a pressing factor than considering, potentially having Julio and Todd Gurley on the same team. But like I've said before, I have all the faith in the Atlanta Falcons offense. So I'm okay having, if I have to go ahead and double dip from any offense, it being that of the Atlanta Falcons. Potentially here, maybe we go Leonard Fournette. I was going ahead and contemplating Amari Cooper. Taking Calvin Ridley would have really been committing to the Atlanta Falcons. So even though we love Calvin Ridley, I'm going to go ahead and avoid doing that. The point here isn't to draft the Atlanta Falcons roster. It's to try and, put the best available roster that week in and week out is going to compete. Because if we really went Calvin Ridley here, then, well, what happens if the Atlanta Falcons have a bust type of week as good as we anticipate them to be? It'll happen from time to time. Then we most certainly would be in a bad situation. So I'm just plain simply going to go another running back here in Leonard Fournette. I think all things considered, we got 2 of the upper echelon running backs that were still left. And immediately, Julio Jones, Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette. I like the upside. Considering that we went wide receiver first, I think we rebounded very nicely here with our next 3 selections at running back. We've got depth, we've got insurance, and we've got the upside, and that's what matters. All these guys are excellent pass catchers, so that'll go a long way in this PPR format, even though it is half-point PPR. Julio Jones is a top 3 wide receiver. I've got him ranked as my second overall wide receiver across all formats. So for that reason, I like where we are sitting. Let's see how this could potentially play out here in terms of who has gone after our selection. You saw Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Le'Veon Bell, Mark Ingram. Not a fan of Mark Ingram going this high in the 4th round. I'd much rather go ahead and, I'd even take a David Montgomery or a David Johnson over Mark Ingram. There's too many running backs in that backfield on top of having Lamar Jackson. Let's go back to our overall big board here and look who is left per Yahoo's rankings. Terry McLaurin, pretty high up here. Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Swift, Devante Parker. So, for example, I'd rather go Devante Parker over a Terry McLaurin. I'd rather go probably Keenan Allen over a Terry McLaurin, even though it's going to be a rough situation with the unknown quarterback. but I still think Keenan Allen is a little bit more solid than McLaurin, just because I mean it's not it's not the best situation with Dwayne Haskins in Washington either. But honestly, I'm looking at the board. Robert Woods is someone that we've liked to target at this point in time. Devante Parker as well. So if either one of those guys are available to us here in the 5th round, that will be our selection. Yeah, just to make sure that no one of incredible value has fallen. So Parker, Keenan Allen, Courtland Sutton, Robert Woods, not bad picks. T.Y. Hilton, DJ Shark just went off the board. So yeah, not too bad. Julian Edelman has gotten a little bit of a bump up, but not nearly enough. In my eyes, he should be above Will Fuller, above Tyler Boyd, above Landry, above Marquise Brown, above Stephon Diggs, above Michael Gallup. You get the point. Cam Newton in town changes the expectations for Julian Edelman in a positive way. Let's look at the situation with the quarterbacks. I believe it's still only been Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. So yeah, it's going to be a long while until we see that next quarterback. It's been I believe 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds since the last quarterback was selected, or since the first quarterback was selected, I should say. So again, a good lesson to go ahead, wait on quarterbacks a little bit. It's not the end of the world. And I think we will get our choice here in terms of what wide receivers we can go with. I mentioned Devante Parker, I mentioned Keenan Allen, I mentioned Robert Woods, and I'm going to go ahead and go with Robert Woods here. Look, if Phillip Rivers was still in town for the Chargers, it would be Keenan Allen, but if Rivers was still there, Keenan Allen also wouldn't be available to us. So I'm going Woods here. I have zero issues with that. I think the separation between, him and Cooper Kupp won't be all that much. So from that perspective, good value. I like it. We've got Julio, we've got Robert Woods. We'll see. Maybe we can sneak in a Devante Parker selection in the 6th round. That would be pretty impressive. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Running backs, pretty much the main starters have been taken off the board. You see Darius Geis potentially still there. How comfortable do you feel with the Washington situation, with his injury history? Those are all valid questions. Kareem Hunt, half-point PPR format, does carry that value. And speaking of him, he just went off the board. Damien Williams, that is a very interesting pick because, we've been saying that, honestly, from 3 months ago, that these rookie running backs are getting way, way, way too much hype, and that it is unwarranted, especially with the COVID situation being what it is, and with training camps and with preseason not being available, and that all these crowded backfields, these running back by committees where everyone just presumed that it would be the rookies immediately. It's actually going to be the veterans that get an early chance at this. So for that reason, I love the Marlon Macks. I love the Damien Williamses, especially those two guys. Now, while we were going on that tirade, we did go ahead and select Devante Parker. So again, really getting some depth at wide receiver after going with running back in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round. And I really like the depth that we've gotten in both positions. Julio, Robert Woods, and then Devante Parker. I'd be 1,000% okay having Devante Parker as a starter on this roster. So if this was a double flex type of situation, Devante Parker immediately is starting, and I would say we've done a pretty good job here as far as depth, as far as starting talent, as far as upside. I really like the way this roster has turned out, even though we maybe went against the grain, like I said, and went Julio Jones first overall. I think it has really paid off up until this point. And we'll see, I'm not going to go ahead and force another running back, something like that. I'm going to play it up until this point. We've gotten best player available, kind of getting some depth at positions that we maybe ignored. So now maybe we can turn our attention a little bit to tight end, a little bit to quarterback. But again, not all that pressing when it's all said and done. I'm all right getting more depth and getting that bench with even more talent. Looking at the tight ends that are available, Jared Cook, Evan Ingram, If Waller was still available, that would have been great, but that isn't the case. So I'm not going to really pay too much attention to tight end. We could go Evan Ingram, very high on him, but I also have some other later round tight ends that I'm very high on. A Mike Gesicki, a Hayden Hurst, a Jack Doyle. So I think those are all some possibilities. And we see Kyler Murray just went off the board a little bit ago. Let's check out these draft results. Since our last selection of Devante Parker, you saw Stephon Diggs, Russell Wilson, Keenan Allen, great value on Keenan Allen at that point in time. Then AJ Green, then Darius Geis, Hunter Henry, Michael Gallup, Kyler Murray. Then San Francisco defense. I imagine that was an auto pick. Nobody at this point in time would, in their right mind, be selecting a defense this early. Josh Allen, Marquise Brown. So we'll have some picks that are maybe a little bit rushed with these auto selections, but that's the way it goes sometimes. It's all right. The core of this roster has been constructed pretty accurately, I would say, with these defensive picks really just now occurring. So when you break this down, so far, honestly, maybe a little bit bullish, but I rate this as an A type of roster. Half point PPR. Julio Jones, top 3, like we said. Robert Woods, top 15 potential. Kenyon Drake, I think, is going to be a top 10 running back. Todd Gurley, right around that range. Mid to low end RB1. Leonard Fournette, same type of situation. And then Devante Parker, he's a little bit risky considering that it really wasn't until last year that he broke out and it took some injuries to some other guys. But I like the upside there. So I really like the squad that we have so far. And, look, in case you don't feel that good about Devante Parker, something like that, Julian Edelman is a great selection at this point in time. And I think that'll be our pick here. I'm quickly scanning over the running backs. I see Marlon Mack there, who I might go ahead and pull the trigger on in this next round because, like I said, I really do think that these veterans, especially in Indianapolis, especially in some other places like Kansas City, will start off as the favored guys. They're going to get more carries, and that will be very valuable. So Marlon Mack could very well be our next selection. Ronald Jones, I think, also falls in that category. Maybe the leash is a little bit shorter there since he doesn't have as much of a proven track record as a Marlon Mack, but we'll see. We could also potentially go quarterback here. These rankings do have Matt Ryan and Drew Brees ranked pretty close together and, not too far away in terms of next best available players. So we'll see. Our turn is next. We'll have one of those selections available to us. Evan Ingram is also there, but I'm not going to rush on tight end like I said. Matt Ryan just went off the board. So we'll see. Maybe I go ahead and wait on a Tom Brady afterwards. I want to see how much later he is going in terms of their ranking. So Drew Brees, Tom Brady over here, about 3 selections afterwards. So honestly, I'm going to go ahead and try to see how that works out. I will draft Marlon Mack here, continue to get that bench depth and really just get some talented players that people are sleeping on. I really like how our roster has shaped up. Let's go ahead and go to it right here, a full screen view. We've got Julio Jones, Robert Woods, like we've mentioned, Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, and our bench, Devante Parker, Julian Edelman, Marlon Mack. That is a very good bench considering the talent that we landed on our starting roster to begin with. Unfortunately, Tom Brady was selected, so we won't be able to go ahead and land him, but that's all right. We can still go ahead and land another quarterback like a probably Carson Wentz, for example, and I'd be perfectly fine with that, or a Matthew Stafford. So we're okay with that, and then probably go high upside, maybe another quarterback like a Cam Newton. So let's go ahead and queue up some of those players because we do at this point need to address those positions as well. I'm honestly shocked that Ryan Tannehill just went above Drew Brees, above Matthew Stafford. That is absolutely insane. Yeah, that's a little bit tough to believe, considering that Ryan Tannehill is a game manager at best on a run-first offense. I mean, you saw it during the playoffs. The fact that he's being selected ahead of Drew Brees, ahead of Matthew Stafford, like we said, is absolutely bananas. But it'll play to our advantage. We can go ahead and make a couple more picks here, quarterback, then potentially tight end to wrap it up, and really put the exclamation point on what I would say has been a very successful draft. You see some rookies here going with Brendan Ayuk, with J.K. Dobbins, Emmanuel Sanders, not a bad flyer to take on a potent New Orleans offense. James White also, has his stock elevated. Same with Sony Michel, with the addition of Cam Newton, who, if he's still there, I might add Cam Newton as a backup quarterback. I think that's some pretty good value in that as a potential, return to breakout type of role in 2020. And, I'm holding my breath that if Drew Brees somehow drops to us, that would be amazing. But I'm I don't really believe that that's going to happen. But who knows? It's 3 picks until our turn, and it has defied logic up until this point. Brees is still available. We'll see what happens. There's some other good available players too. Evan Ingram is still on the board, and of course he just goes. And with our luck, I imagine Drew Brees will also go with one of these next 2 selections. But I'm all right with it. Like I said, there's a lot of talent here in terms of other quarterbacks. If Drew Brees is selected, Matthew Stafford, Carson Wentz, Aaron Rodgers, those are all going to be potential choices. But let's see what happens here. And if this selection before us is quarterback driven. If it is, we will pivot, but we will be all right. Other guys that we could go with, let's see. Oh, it was quarterback, but interestingly enough, it was Aaron Rodgers. So one of the other guys that we were considering. So this is going to be a pretty easy selection here, folks, with Drew Brees. So our starting roster, Drew Brees, Julio Jones, Robert Woods, Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, tight end yet to be filled, then Leonard Fournette, Marlon Mack, Julian Edelman, Devante Parker. Folks, I love this roster. If this was our actual roster, we take this into week 1, I would be extremely happy with the way that this is playing out. I think there's probably an A grade in here. I really do believe that. There's some risk with the running back situation with a Gurley, with the Leonard Fournette. You expect a drop in production, especially in the pass catching category, but you expect that positive touchdown regression from the other side of it. Kenyon Drake, I'm pretty confident in him being a top 10 running back. We'll see what happens there. So let's take a look at now maybe some running backs that potentially have been forgotten about. At this point, it's pretty much all backups, so I'm not going to go ahead and rush it. We could go Chase Edmonds in handcuff, but we could do that much later on. Wide receivers, there's some talent with the Jamison Crowder, with the Justin Jefferson, who I really like. But it's our turn next. Let's take a look at tight ends and make a selection here so that we can go ahead and round out this thing and go ahead and give it a final grade. Like I've told you before, I really like Jack Doyle. That's going to be our selection. And then let's go ahead and view this roster one final time. We have got Drew Brees, Julio Jones, Robert Woods, Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, Jack Doyle, Leonard Fournette, Devante Parker, Julian Edelman, and Marlon Mack. So I really like the depth. I really like the starting bunch. We could use another tight end as a backup, as some depth. So that at one point in time would be another selection of mine, as we could also do with a backup quarterback. So let's just go ahead for the sake of doing this and queue up some of those guys. So quarterback, I will queue up a Cam Newton that I am high on. I will go ahead for tight end and queue up let's see, out of these guys, the player that I'm the highest on is Mike Gesicki. If he's not there, then I'm looking at some of these other names. Yeah, we've scrolled way too down. Other names that we could consider: Dallas Goedert, a Greg Olsen, but I like our Jack Doyle situation. So overall, grading this team in terms of strengths, in terms of weaknesses, quarterback I'm happy with. We kind of said from the get-go that we're going to go ahead and get one of these probably tier 2, tier 3 group of guys that are still QB1s. But on the flip side, we're going to have a really strong group of guys at wide receiver and running back, and that is the case with Julio and Robert Woods. I love that combination. Kenyon Drake, Todd Gurley, I'm very happy with that. Not that big of a drop-off considering that we went wide receiver early, and then that we also had a latter pick, the 9th pick overall to begin with. You could point to Jack Doyle as being the pick here that is the weakest. And sure, if there's injuries, something like that, then that would be a spot at tight end that causes some problems. But I would say on the flip side, well, if we need to make a trade for a tight end or something like that, we've got the ammunition, folks. We've got Devante Parker, Julian Edelman, and Marlon Mack. So I really like the way this is played out. I'm going to go ahead and give this an A- type of grade. Let me know what you guys think. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other fantasy questions? And again, quick reminder, go ahead, check out the all-new updated website at alldaypigskin.com. Get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide while you are there. All the details in the description. And if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.